If you ask around, you will find many mediums who use psychometry to connect to people who had passed over. Psychometry is the practice where you hold an item that belonged to the dead person and translate the energy you get from the object into words. Psychometry is not necessarily proof of life after death. It's purely proof that the object absorbed energy from its owner and a medium can read that energy from the object. Of course, when someone dies and you're struggling to let go of the person, the easiest thing is to go to the nearest spiritualist church and hope for the best. Sadly, that is what you do. You hope for the best. I've confirmed in at least 2 countries that the preferred style of a spiritualist church medium is something like, I have a person named something like Mary floating around here. Mary is wearing a red cardigan. Who can take Mary? And then they wait for someone in the audience to put up a hand and say, that might be my Auntie Mary who died before I was born. So I never knew her and I had no relationship with her, but let's hear what she has to say to me. And both the medium and the recipient are happy with the exchange. For me, that's preying on the vulnerability of the audience. And this not only happens in spiritualist churches. I once attended a show in a town hall where an extremely popular English medium and his spirit guide were performing to a sellout audience of about 1,000 people, using the same approach. There were hopeful sick people in wheelchairs in the audience, and also people who were desperate to get some confirmation from their deceased loved ones. They all paid for their tickets in the hope that their Mary would have a very personal word for them. If that medium had conveyed to the audience a general message of hope and peace, I would have had a lot more respect for him. Instead, he used a hit-and-miss spiritualist approach and ended up having about 10 willing hits and 990 disappointed misses. I once called into one of these popular online radio shows and asked for a reading. I have a South African English accent that I cannot hide, but the medium on the show didn't pick that up. She immediately launched into a description of my English Uncle John on my father's side, who fought in France during World War I and who remembered me clearly. I told her that my father didn't have an Uncle John or any male relative as far or wide as you could think with the name of John, which is not an Afrikaans name. I also told her that none of my relatives of the relevant age group ever fought in France in any war, because none of them had ever left South Africa. And surely I would have heard of this at some stage from some family member. The lady told me that I just needed to be open to the message and that it would eventually make sense to me. She then terminated the reading and moved on to the next person who dialed in. She forgot to close the phone line, and I heard her saying to the host that she believed I was suffering from psychic amnesia. Either that or she was on some fishing expedition and I didn't play along. You decide. I've had clients coming to me for a psychic reading and then asking for messages from their deceased loved ones. Sometimes I could oblige them, but other times not. That has nothing to do with my gift. When a person passes over, they leave their physical body behind. Their consciousness goes straight into a spiritual intensive care unit, where they are helped to recover from their experience of leaving their bodies behind. In earthly time, this can take a short or a long time. You can imagine that someone who had a good many years and welcomed their passing wouldn't have much of a struggle, compared to someone else who died suddenly in an accident, or who died after a long struggle with disease. Each case is as individual as we are. Once the person is out of this spiritual intensive care unit, they normally stay in the vicinity to take care of their loved ones. When that is the case, they are on hand, so to speak, to pop into a reading and say hello. During this stage, the deceased person will do what they can to communicate with the person who was left behind. They will use their favorite fragrance, for example, when you are not a smoker and you smell your grandfather's pipe in the room, or you suddenly become aware of a perfume that you don't use but associate with the deceased person. I once had a very embarrassed client in Kenya who was hoping for contact with her late husband. I described to her a gentleman who was holding his breath and pinching his nose. She burst out laughing and confirmed that it was indeed her husband talking to me. He had a huge issue with flatulence to the annoyance of his family.